Hello, Channel Automation podcast listeners. Welcome back to another deep dive into the techniques that convert leads. I'm your host, Casey Arias, and I'm joined here today by the Channel Automation team, Vic Sun and Stephen White. How you both feeling today? I know we're going to be talking dialers, and so, Stephen, you feeling good?
I'm feeling great, Casey. I'm ready to go.
Great. Vic, how you feeling?
Good.
Short and sweet. Got it. Love it. Okay. So first of all, we want to deep dive into what are the different lead aggregators that are popular and what are the best way to convert on these. And one of the things that we want to tie in is related to specifically dialers, which is why we have the call center gurus on this call. And so to start off with, I wanted to ask, what would you say are the top 3 most successful lead aggregators that everybody should be using that's good for their budget?
I don't know about successful, but there's really large companies. Angie, Modernize, Quinn Street, those are probably very, very popular in home services, home improvement, remodeling, construction, handyman services, that particular space. So Angie, Modernize, and Quinn Street. How about you, Stephen?
Those are 3 big ones that come to mind when I think lead aggregators. I know that if you're running a call center and you're trying to keep your dialer busy, you definitely have a lead list coming from Modernize. The challenge really for those is, number one is can you get to them quickly and can you convert on them? So I know that there's specific ways we want to try to convert. Maybe we have an idea or we have a script where we're going to try to catch someone at the right time. If we're going through it and we're just hammering everything with the same script, I feel like there could be a better way.
Is there a particular strategy that you use with these different leads coming in? Is there a different strategy you use with different products? What's the best way to get started with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I see is that it's all in one bucket. If we're getting these leads from different sources, it's not segmented. We're just all right, well, maybe we're Angie's and Modernize are in the same bucket, but it's a very different customer journey from the start. If we're using a dialer like Five9, it has all of these tools and all these features available to you to make the process much more effective for each one of these lead aggregators. Now, these are things that aren't obvious to the original setup. They just want to make it work. Do the leads come in? Are they called? Great, it's done. Let's set up. Let's get going. But if you leave it at that, really, you're not getting the most out of your Five9 infrastructure. What do you think, Vic?
I think what I was going to say is most of the companies, when they buy these, they almost say, well, these are the 3 lead sources, Angie or Home Advisor, Modernize, and Quinn Street. And let's pretend it's all one product. Let's say it's all bath products or roofing products, right? They're not really segmenting it or using the data once they start going at it to start calibrating it on Five9. So they end up saying, well, this is my ASAP list, or ASAP list, calling this the ones that came in right away. They're outbounding to it. That's mostly what these leads are. They're web forms. So you actually have to outbound to them. The one thing we kind of skipped a step here. I think it's understanding for the audiences out there. Let's say, oh, these are the lead sources. Lots of these lead sources that are the cheaper lead sources, I say that in quotation marks because actually they become very, very expensive, especially when you don't know what you're doing and you're not converting it the right way. A lot of them, let's break it apart. There's unbranded and shared. There's branded and exclusive. There's unbranded and exclusive. And then, you kind of have a mixture of all of those. A lot of the times when we see a lot of companies buying from these big companies, it's mostly unbranded and it's shared. So it's really the lowest intent ones. And it's the ones that 3 to 5, I've seen it as high as 6 or 7, other contractors or other companies, are buying, right? Other home services companies are purchasing. And if they're all having the same system of speed to lead, let's pretend everybody's using Five9, okay? And you assume this with your competition, you almost see when you go into all of those companies, they're using the same strategy. Speed to lead, as soon as they get it, and our call centers are calling the customer at the same time, okay? What you get is a customer now getting bombarded with all these calls. So I'm going to suggest something I think that's fairly controversial, and I'll pass it back to you, Stephen, on this. But I would almost say go and run those campaigns and follow what everybody's doing. But once you have the data and you say, they don't really pick up, on our first phone call, they pick up maybe after we call them on the 3rd time, I wouldn't call them right away. I would actually wait during that time and kind of start collecting the data and saying, they actually pick up around 2-3 hours, or maybe at 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. It's it's not intuitive to these people, but it's definitely something that I would use during using data, test it out. And I would say, like, just because you're the first to call doesn't mean you're the first to convert. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. Just because you're the first to call doesn't mean you're the first to convert. The first person that calls usually is a company that's able to have, usually they're good at the speed of lead, but some of the way that they go through the conversion process is lacking, where they're not focused on the user experience seems to be the thing that we're harping on a lot. And I agree that it's important. I just got another call from one of the people we talked to. My number's in like 15 call centers, call systems right now, and I get a call from each one. And I take that opportunity every time, honestly, to test and kind of see how they would handle a call. Where is it coming from? What's the call cadence? And I kind of keep track of these things for our clients just to get an idea of how well their call center is working, if there's room for improvement, to continuously follow that path. And from the speed to lead perspective, when I first got the message from them, it's interesting that, the original call is, it's the first person that's calling, but I feel like if you're not taking advantage of that in a way that's meaningful to the person that's receiving that call, that it's really not an effective strategy.
It kind of reminds me, and I'm going to show my age here a little bit, of when they used to have those call-in, maybe they still do, call-in competitions on radio shows. Like, everybody tries to call in at the one time to win something on a radio show, but once you are the person live that gets through, you have to be ready to perform, depending on what question they ask you, right? It's not so much to get there first. Like, it's a
Those are still happening, by the way.
Those
If you listen to the radio, those are live.
Yeah. I think that the really sad part is you've got this technology like Five9, for example, and a lot of companies go about it and saying, oh, I bought this really very, very robust piece of technology, and they're using it almost as if if there were 100 pieces of features in there, they're barely using 10% of it, right? And they're copying what everybody else is doing because they're working with the same consultants. They're not thinking for themselves. They're not reading through the data. I had a conversation with a company up in NorCal, and I looked, they were buying Queen Street leads, right? Queen Street leads, and I think they had Angie leads as well, or Home Advisor, I forget, but they definitely had Queen Street leads, and you about 1,200, 1,300 leads a month, approximately. Looked at it, they're connecting less than 5%, like 4% connect rate, okay, on those on a month in, month out basis. And I thought, so 96% of these you don't connect with, or you don't convert on it at all, because if you can't connect, you can't convert, right? Those numbers are pretty identical. And I go, why don't you just go and first I asked, what is the most common thing that happens when they do connect with you? And you ask them, like, how come you're not picking up the phone? Because I called you a few times. They say, because, a lot of people are calling us and I didn't even know it was you. And you're just coming up as spam, blah, 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 and all these other issues that come with it. And then people think, oh, it's Five9 is the issue. My DID is the issue. No, it's a strategy is the problem, right? Your strategy is the problem. And then they go, so they really tell you that they don't want to get the phone calls and such. Says, yeah, some of them were just, sometimes they'll pick up and we'll get like a high contact rate that day, but they're just telling us, hey, take me off your list. I don't want to be on this list. They don't even hear us out because they've been bombarded with other phone calls. So I thought to myself, what will be cool, because this is experimenting. Why don't you just do this IVR blast instead of an actual agent, kind of going and sitting there waiting for the phone calls, and say, this is blah, blah, blah company. You did this. You probably got a lot of phone calls. To take you off the list, press 2. And then you get to an agent. And then the agent now will say, like, and then you go like, oh, yeah, I want to be taken off the list. So before I do that, let me ask you a few questions. At least now you have somebody who's just like, yeah, I pressed 2 because I want to be taken off your list. But now you get the time to pitch. But it's just a different approach. But companies don't seem to get, like, when you have Five9, experiment, right? Use the technology in there, the IVR, getting people connected. If you're not getting connections and you're calling them 20, 30, 40 times, then find a time in the day where you get the most connections and only call them then. And again, we're so specific to dialers here. We're not talking about the text and the emails. That's another podcast on its own. But just for the dialers, I feel like it's almost as if like you have a professional software or platform, but it's at the hands of an amateur. You know what I mean? And then this person is like, oh, let me see what people are doing on YouTube. And they're just copying whatever people are doing instead of like, you know what? I've got the data here. Let me try and test an experiment. So question to you, because you work with a lot of call centers across the country. What's the deal? Why don't they just want to experiment? Why don't they want to test these things?
I think a lot of people do want to try and test an experiment, or at least they have ideas, right? Like they're in the middle of the things and they're trying to get some things, like they're trying to get the rubber to hit the road on some of the projects. When they are presented with a challenge, and this is going to be like some feedback for a specific use case that I am involved with one or two, I think maybe a couple of our clients have the same issue. Well, they'll talk to the TSM, like, so they pay for this expensive TSM to complete or test things. And when they go to this TSM, like, hey, I want to complete this project here. Here's the plan. Here's what I want to do. The TSM goes, okay, yeah, let me look into it. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just one specific TSM or a couple of them, but it's like, and I hope this isn't casting too much shade at Five9, but it's almost like they're putting it off until the next month. And then when they meet with them again, it's like, oh yeah, I'll look into it. And it's just a continuous cycle of, I'm going to look into it, but with no action. The only time that they found that action does come through when it's in the form of a new project that they're trying to sell. It's like, I'm not trying to talk to you every month because I want a sales pitch. I want to talk to you every month because we've got some improvement that's on the way. Maybe Five9 is starting to do this a lot. Maybe some other people have experienced this on their end where a TSM isn't completing things. Instead, they're waiting for the next opportunity to sell the next project or the next thing. It's really frustrating to hear when that happens. And I try to guide them on this journey with their TSM to give them very pointed things that maybe they just don't know what to ask. Maybe they don't know what to look for. It's such a robust system.
I'm going to ask you next is, what if once you're finally connected to your dialer team, your account manager, like if you have a Five9, what's like the number one or number 2 and 3 things that you need to get set up first? That's like bare minimum for success.
Bare minimum stuff that they have set up for success. Well, bare minimums are always set up at the beginning when they set up their account, assuming they're correctly. Sometimes I've seen instances where that's not fully fleshed out, whether it be on the initial setup, because most of the time these like for Five9, they're not a company that only handles home improvement leads. They're a company that, and I know we talked to a lot of home improvement clients, so that's why I mentioned home improvement, but they're not only specifically handling that vertical. They're handling everything. They're going with, they've got home improvement, they have some insurance companies, some like cold call dialing systems,
medical,
healthcare.
Look, Five9's the big gold standard out there. So, but it's really interesting what you just said about how the TSMs, now the technical support management team. Not a lot of companies. I mean, at least the companies that we've seen, the over $100 million, they will certainly mostly have that. When you're under $100 million, they kind of say, nah, we don't want to pay for that, and we'll call them when there's an issue. Again, I want to keep it simple for our audiences out there. Let's get back to the core here. Modernize, Angie, QuinStreet, low intent, unbranded, shared leads, where they don't know your company A and the company B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. They don't know those. The user basically went on a landing page or Angie or Home Advisor or Modernize a page. They filled out a form and they said, I need help on a bathroom. I need help on a roof. I need help on solar, whatever. And they said, okay. And then that landing page will say, oh, one of our pros or our contractors will connect with you. That's just about it, right? Like now the user goes, okay, somebody's going to call me. What they don't realize at that point is like several people are going to call you, right? Because these lead generators are obviously selling it multiple times. And when it comes to the dialer, most of the companies we deal with, they've had this dialer. Would you disagree that most of them would have had this dialer at least 6 months now?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. So what's one thing that you see often with companies under 100 million with regards to their data? What is missing when you try to look at the data?
Conversion tracking usually.
You're right, because they don't even negotiate. So for all you Five9 users out there, you should have your data for at least a year, but most of you probably, when you look at your contract, you have it for 60 days. That's why some people are surprised, like, how come I can't pull my data from like 3 months ago? Duh, because you don't have it, you know what I mean? It's not even connected anywhere.
When we start to do discovery, we're trying to figure out what's going on with the company. Working with only 3 months of data is very challenging to get a full picture of kind of like the trend lines, because I could see 3 months of data, but honestly, if I'm just looking at 1 quarter, I mean, that could be wildly different from the previous quarter.
It could
Right.
be
But
Christmas time or something. Like, who knows?
Mhm.
that's right. Like patterns throughout the year of macroeconomic forces, etc. So that's the first, one of the elements that you could take a look at and say, hey, with my dialer, since I'm buying a lot of these low intent, unbranded shares, I need the data so that I can study it. So for those of you guys who don't have that, either go back to Five9 and negotiate where you can get your data for at least in the recordings for about a year, or connect with us because we can help you build out an SFTP of some sort, right? So that you can at least have a recall more than 2 months. But once you have that and you're able to go and read through the data, it's going to be clear as day. This isn't rocket science, people. You go into your reports and then you look at the lead source and you go, we're calling people 50 times, you know what I mean, in a month. And we've seen that. I mean, you get some of our listeners and viewers probably think I'm exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. There are companies who will call you 50, 100 times over a course of 2 months, right? Because
Some say that's
how
not enough. They're like,
it's not enough because they obviously, well, we're gonna keep calling until they say F off or take me off your list. But I think that's where a lot of companies miss out, because if you see this and you go, okay, we average 30 calls a month, 1 call a day, and we don't convert. I think what they're missing is, well, let's take a look at the people who are converting. What time of the day do they actually, right? What zip codes are they in? Okay. What did we hear in the conversations, right? If you use a platform like Rilla, I'm going to put a plug for Rilla. Rilla, hello, we're not official partners yet,
Next
but
sponsor, you want to be on our little sponsor area. There you go.
right. Well, I was just talking to a couple of our partners who said we're going to get introduced to Rilla. But anyway, let's say you have the transcription, you've got NLP, and you have this. Why don't you pull all of that stuff and go, the ones that we speak to, the ones that even say, I'm not interested, I've already bought some from somebody else, pull this and you go, hey, now I can use this data to calibrate my dialer. That's why I'm spending $130 to $200 per license a month with Five9, because I'm supposed to be able to go and use it as a tool to go and calibrate my campaigns. Sometimes I just get so riled up, or maybe it's 3 cups of coffee I've had today, but it's just, why won't you use what's available? The reporting system with Five9 is so robust. The lead sources tell you, hey, Queen Street, Angie, Modernized Home Advisor, low intent shared, lots of people are not going to be picking up. Here's the times of day during the daytime or in the nighttime that people do pick up. Here are the conversations, and here's the zip codes. Here's the URLs. Use that, and then you go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start experimenting. For this one, I'm going to only call you after, 2 hours after I receive the lead. You can do that with Five9. These ones will only get called uniformly at these times of the day, because this is when people get home. And we feel, based on the data, it's pretty strong that we actually get people to pick up at 6, 7 p.m. right, during dinner time, or maybe right after, right? And then you go and say, let me test that, because to be honest with you, you're not really missing out. If you got less than 20% connect rate engagement rate, you're not going to get any worse. With experimentation, it can't get any worse. I think at that point, you're going to be getting a lift, or you're going to feel this. You're going to see the same results, but you need to use the data, start experimenting, and then at that point, if you still don't get what these particular improvements or lifts, then you call somebody like Steven, right, or a consultant, or you go back to Five9, pay for the TSM, pay for the training, and go, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, because I tried that, I tried to experiment, I tried to learn it, I tried to calibrate, and I don't know what I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with that. You just go, you try it first, and then if you're not a do-it-yourselfer, then get the help you need, because it's such an expensive platform, I think.
So I wanted to ask you, Stephen, because you have been doing call center management and also consulting on call center management. Vic has brought up some excellent points, and it's a really, really good recipe for success when you're actually looking over the analytics and you're like, people answer most during this time. People are going to be responding during this time. This is what people like actually based on our data, want to see, this is the kind of messaging they want to see. As a call center manager who basically has every single second of their day templated out for them because they're so busy, you know, how do you go about putting that in? How do you dedicate the time in order to dedicate like what you need to in order to get this successful response?
I don't think that call center manager you just described has the time. They're probably inundated with the day-to-day. And that's what I think a lot. There's usually a separate. What I would say is if you're that call center manager and you're stuck dealing with the day-to-day, you may not have the time to focus on the analytics of it. Usually this is something I see. It's kind of like a pet projects of their own where like, oh, it might be interesting to find this out, but it's not something they've dedicated like an hour a day or 2 hours a day, actually scheduling time away from the call center, from the buzz of things, so that they can focus on it. Because it does require like an analytical mind. And if you're coming at it from call center managers, I think by trade are just like energetic people, really intense sometimes, but just very active, and they have a big personality. And I'm not saying those personality types are not able to go in and start looking at the analytics, but it's almost like turning off that thing to go and take a look at it, really examine it for a good amount of time, so you can start to make those start to draw those, make those 2 points connect, where you say, you know, these leads are effective in this way and these leads are effective in that way. Those kinds of things are, they take time. They take time and they take energy to figure out what the best strategy is. And even building out the reports is another aspect of it. And I think just getting to the point where you're looking at the reports in a meaningful way would be the first step towards getting there. The reporting is difficult to manage and to get it to work the way you want it to. Within Five9, it's so robust. There's so much you can figure out within there.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you both. Like, I'll ask Casey because you don't have any hair. Casey, do you go and you have hair down here?
Wow,
but not up here.
Thank you.
That's yeah.
Down here being my chin, right?
His chin.
Right, yeah. Which I can't.
Thank
grow,
you.
I have a hormone disorder, and you know it looks really like weak, right? But anyway, enough of that self-deprecation. Casey, do you? I mean, your hair looks nice. I've seen you have different styles. Do you do that on your own? Do you cut your hair on your own? Do you color it on your own?
Do.
Or okay. Oh, you don't go to a professional. Okay, wrong example.
No.
Okay, I always
use me as the example. I'm gonna ruin it.
I also cut my own hair for the
no,
record.
hold on. Yeah, for the record. Okay. So, but let me ask you. Let me transition a little bit. But you're not are you? I mean, I've known you for almost 7 years now. You're not a professional hairstylist, or you've not gone to barber school.
Absolutely not. In fact, I can barely cut my own hair, and then my husband always wants me to cut his hair, and I make a mess of it.
Okay, so here it is. So if you did go, I mean, you've probably at least at one point in your life have seen a hairstylist or somebody who can cut hair professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, my mother-in-law is a professional.
Okay, so think about this, right? If your mother-in-law or the person you're going to is a professional, they know how to cut hair. They've studied that. They have experience with that. They know what to do when there's something wrong. They avoid those things because of their experience and their knowledge. You go to that professional because that professional knows how to do it. I like Steven's, take on most call center managers, especially if like it wasn't their idea to bring in Five9. They've never architected anything or implemented. It boggles me. What makes companies think, yeah, we're going to go and put in like this $250,000 system and we're going to have the amateur or the novice or the person who has no experience start managing it. Just because there's somebody who will help them put it together. It's mind-boggling. Steven's right. If you have a call center manager, what's that?
I feel like they don't think it through because I've thought the exact same thing. Like when I've seen it implemented and they're like, okay, so make it work. These guys, they need the tools to make it work. And that's the same thing that we've talked about in plenty of our other podcasts. If you don't give the team the tools, they can't happen.
But getting them the tools is different from, so Five9's a beast, like as Steven was talking about. Maybe I think and again, maybe we'll plug some other companies. Maybe you should baby step people. Try like a call rail or a small ring central, like have them kind of play around with some of the $30-$40 a license platforms first, and then start going and studying Five9 and kind of playing with that. But we see companies like 6 months, a year, 2 years into it, and you go into the Five9, it's like it looks exactly the same it's like when you open the box, out of the box, like, implementation, it looks exactly the same from when they did it to today. And let's say 2 years have gone, and they're still having the same problems. And instead of fixing those, right? There was one company, Steven, again, we don't name the companies, but there was one company that we met. They couldn't figure out the integration. So what they did for some of their leads was they didn't put it in Five9. They started manually printing the lead as it came along and then dialing on Five9 manually. Remember that?
Why do you even have Five9?
What? And they just gave up. It says, why don't you just spend money with a consultant, TSM for Five9 or the Five9 team to calibrate it for you? And they're like, oh, we don't want to pay for that. You're paying for it literally now with the inefficiency and the paper that you're printing and the ink and the time it takes to do it. But again, I think it's because they go and say, this is the number one response when a call center manager is free to respond when we ask, so how come you haven't fixed this? And their thing is, because it wasn't my idea. I didn't like this. I don't know how to use this. So to them, it's just like, yeah, my boss told me, like, we're going to start doing this. They put it on my plate. I don't have time to learn this. So if I'm going to solve it, I'm going to solve it in the easiest way, even if it makes no sense, since I have this platform. So I think, going to your thing, what would you suggest then? Because people will be like, what do you want me to do? Hire another person, put more money into, hiring somebody who actually knows what they're doing on Five9? Is that what you're suggesting, Steven? Is that
I would lean
suggestion?
in. Yes, I'm suggesting that.
Yeah, but how do you overcome that? Because they're going to be like, yeah, well, we could have done that, but we don't want to spend the money.
It's all about framing.
Yeah,
the way that you frame it.
Yeah, we're getting into negotiation tactics here on the podcast.
No, we don't. We don't want to do that. I think it's just a point we're trying to get across, which is, if you want to get the most out of Five9, most out of the conversions on Angie, Modernize, right, Home Advisor to QuinStreet, the low intent ones, you really need an expert for the Five9 piece who knows how to calibrate that, knows how to experiment, right? Who's got the guts to experiment. And when I say guts, I mean experience and the ability to read data, because nothing is guaranteed in the world. But if they have those, they're not doing it blindly. It's a calibrated risk when you're doing the experimentation. And I think once you get that, doing something unintuitive, because if 5 other call centers are having the same problem and you're also having this, if you start hiring the expert, you're the only one who's probably doing it. And then maybe at some point, within that journey, 2 to 3 months, you'll start seeing yourself increasing your conversion by 2, 3, 4, 5x, whatever the case may be.
And I think if you really, really are at a point in which you absolutely have no money to invest in an expert, then it's going to be one of those situations in which you have to find a champion within your own team who's interested in taking on this task, because maybe it isn't your call center manager. Maybe it's an assistant who is willing to take a look at like what you already have, review the data, compile the data, and then present, okay, this is what I have, and based on this, this, and this, I think that this is the direction that we should go. Somebody that you can actually trust reviewing data. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, it's maybe buying less leads and then allocating those leads that you're buying that you're not converting, and then just doing something simple like that. I buy 1,000 leads. I'm only converting on 5%. So 95% aren't, I'm not doing anything. Why don't I take 10% of that and then put it towards, so that I get the rest of the leads being affected and it's better. I think maybe that's what you're saying, Casey, is trying to solve this problem upstream, in handling that, and maybe saying it's a budgetary constraint. Well, you have all those leads that you're not converting on. Why not take some of that money so that you can affect the rest of the other leads? But I think it's also doing things like, well, maybe what you should do is, if you're not converting, is put your call center's misery to an end and just simply send the IVR to all these leads. 95% of them are not picking up, and say, press 2 to get, to be taken off our list. And I think, to me, like, I'm suggesting this because this is in fact something that a lot of people with low intent, especially if they've been bombarded, I would argue, if you guys go and come and talk to us if you want to know how to implement that. But I would argue that there's a good chunk of those people that would probably press 2. And then now you have agents actually speaking to people. Even if they say, oh yeah, I wanted to go and get myself taken off the list, can you do that? Great. Now you have an opportunity to pitch this person, right? Because I would go, oh yeah, thanks for calling in, John. Yeah, let me go ahead and pull up your file here, and so that I can make sure that, if this is not your cup of tea, we'll take you off. Okay, so you went through a website called Angie or Home Advisor. Is that you? Okay, and you were looking for a bathroom pro? Is that, or do you not know that at all? Oh yeah, that was a few months ago. Okay, so you got that taken care of at this point. No, but I've just been getting a lot of phone calls. Okay. Have you gotten a quote from us? I'm just curious because you're asking me to take you off. No. Okay. Well, how do you know that we can't do the work for you? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you give your call center people a chance to actually speak to somebody? It's just not the way you think about it. It's just not like, you got to go upstream. You got to go and say, what do people want? People want to be taken off the list. And they'll press 2, press 3, whatever that button is, so that I can get connected to an agent. Do it. Give it to the person. Let them go and connect with you so you can actually have a better connect rate. It's under the premise of being taken off the list. I get that. Your agents will probably say, I'd rather speak to somebody than sit there 10 minutes at a time waiting for somebody to go and pick up. Because I think a lot of call center staff, it sounds like it's crazy. It's 10 minutes, but waiting and sitting down, looking at a screen until the call comes in where somebody actually picks up hello, that can be very daunting mentally, I think.
The moralizing is like, especially if you do that every single day of the week or most days of the week for 8 to 10 hours a day, even 4 hours a day, it could be mentally exhausting when it's just like it's like, basically, think about it this way. If you're trying to contact somebody all the time, all day, and you just can't contact anybody, it's just like, I would rather talk to somebody who wants to be taken off the list than talk to nobody at all. Because then at least I can have a conversation with them,
This reminds me of a Key and Peele. For those of you guys who are listening, go Key and Peele telemarketing. There's a skit that they done that is like, people have watched it millions of times, and there's basically a call center rep trying to sell somebody, and then Jordan Peele is like, basically like, okay, you don't want this, and then he hangs up, and now the person's just like, what the, and then he calls in. It's an inbound call now, so lots of people just watch it because it's Key and Peele and it's comedy. What they don't realize is there's an actual psychological technique there that call centers, the best call centers in the US and Canada and the world, use. When a customer inbounds, when you are the one calling in, the power belongs to the one taking the call. The power now shifts. There's a power dynamic where you're calling in as the user, and then now the company goes, hello. The power shifts because now you're like, what do you want? You know what I mean? That's what happened in that skit. Jordan Peele goes, hello, and then he goes like, yeah, you just called me. Okay, what do you want? And the guy, they're actually, that's why that skit was so brilliant. And then he goes like, you just hung up on me, and he says, okay, so you didn't want the package, so I hung up on you. So what? And it's funny because he changed his tone. You know why? Because now it's an inbound call. But I think that people just, if you're not a professional enough to get that there's those psychological nudges in skits like these, and you don't get it, then you should find help, or you should say to your manager, to your VP, to your owner, listen, I can go and train call center reps. I can create scripts. I can go train them. I can manage their attendance. I can go help them, set up for these things. I can interview. I can fire people when I need to. Here's the thing I can't do. I can't cut hair because I'm not a professional hairstylist. And so what makes you think right? That I can handle this system because I'm not a professional analyst when it comes to Five9 and dialers. And I think if you had that honest conversation, right, and you watched a Key and Peele video, you'd be all right. You'd get somewhere.
Being honest with yourself and honest with the people in charge is extremely important. And even if they give you some sort of like passive answer, like, okay, well, make yourself a professional. At least at some point you have been like, okay, well, this is where I'm starting, right? And I'm going to now have to develop steps in order to get to the point of where I need to be. But open communication is never a problem, or like never unwelcome within companies. Open communication is extremely important. So that's going to be it for us today. And whether you loved or hate what we had to talk about, we do want to hear from you. So comment or shoot us an email at hello@channelautomation.com. And also, please consider subscribing to this podcast and get some tips and tricks on marketing and call centers. And as always, keep that conversion high.